Hello everyone. Wanted to give a quick, very focused update. This isn't a developer log, as all the other or many of the other videos are. This is very much focused on a particular feature, and the reason I wanted to do this one is so that it can serve as a bit of an explainer, because it's actually quite a complex, relatively complex concept that's might be a little bit difficult to grasp from printed or written documentation, so showing rather than telling might be a little bit more useful in this case. So it's around how Kwyll deals with, on the spectrum in particular, in colours. So as you know, on the spectrum you've got an ink and a paper colour and a brightness that can be applied per 8x8 cell on the screen, and obviously Kwyll follows that and it has in the past tried to provide as many tools as possible to make it as easy as possible for you to define your game screens and levels and rooms and so on. But one of the things that came up recently while looking at some of the content that the early adopters on Discord are creating was that the methods that I'd used up until now, while flexible, were not necessarily as optimal as they could be. And by optimal I mean in terms of how much memory they use on the spectrum. So I started looking at ways of cutting down the memory use per room while not taking away too much in terms of the flexibility. So I've come up with a solution that I think fits that bill. As I say, it's a little bit more complicated than before, but it doesn't have to be. It depends on how much of the new features you want to use. So I'll go through, if I quickly switch over to the game screen, the editor, so you can see what I've got. So this is a test file. Looks a bit weird, but I'll explain exactly what's going on here so you can see. And I'll explain as best I can what the different options you've got available to you are in terms of choosing the final colour, ink and paper, for a particular 8x8 cell. I'm calling them cells just to keep the language common, and how you can optimize your rooms using those tools. So up until now, up until this change, all tiles were just single colour, and you painted them onto the room map as white on black by default, and then you chose the colours here and painted an ink and paper colour over the top to change the colour. You did have some flexibility in the map in choosing a default ink and paper colour per location that would replace anything that didn't have a manual colour painted over it, but that was all you had. So now I've introduced another level of control, and that's on the tiles themselves. So you'll notice over here these three tiles that we've got in play here, they're no longer just white on black, and this is because I've introduced the ability to add a default colour as well as collision, but I won't cover the collision aspect in this video. This is purely about the colour. A default ink and paper colour for a tile. Now you'll notice that the ink on this particular one is set to magenta, the paper is crossed out. Now that's because in this case, not in all cases, but in this case certainly, you can choose a particular colour, or you can say don't apply a colour here, and you'll see why that matters in a moment. So in this particular tile, this one here, it's specified that the tile ink is magenta and the paper is whatever. I'm not defining a particular paper colour for this tile. On this one I've got both ink and paper specified, so it's cyan ink on blue paper, and on this one, the original, which is what it used to be, don't specify any particular colour at all. So now what happens when it's trying to work out, when Kwyll is trying to work out what colour to use in a particular cell, is it will start with the room colour. So let me just explain that. So if we go to here in the locations, So I've only got one room, but I'm using it multiple times here. And in each room, each map location, you can set a background, or these are actually the default ink and paper colours. Background colour is probably a poor name, so I'll change that. So you can set the ink and paper colours for use in that location. So I've got two locations here, one black on green and one blue on red, and they're named for their colour choices. So blue ink on red paper, so we can see what's going on. So back to the room. When it's drawing one of these colours, one of these tiles, it chooses the colour first by looking at the ink and paper colour in the location. That's what it starts with. If nothing else overrides it, that's the colour it'll be. Then it will look at the tile that's being placed, if there's a tile there at all, and if that has an ink or a paper, it will replace the ink or paper from the room. So you can. This is why it's important to be able to choose in the tile whether or not to use an ink or a paper. So for let's look at this one here. This is that tile. So it will always paint with purple magenta ink, but it will adopt the paper colour from the location, which is very useful when you want to move from location to location and have a different background colour, but you want the tiles to remain the same ink. So you can reuse these tiles across multiple locations, safe in the knowledge that the background will be the one that matches with the location you're in, and the ink will be whatever you choose. So, and you can overwrite the paper as well. So I think I've got an example here, maybe not in this case, but yes, these ones here. So yeah, so these ones here override both the ink and the paper at the tile. So these ones will take on the cyan ink on blue paper in any location they're used, unless they're painted over, which gets to the third point, the third way of changing a colour in priority order, and that is using the paintbrush, which was always there before. So you can paint ink and paper colour and brightness over individual cells, and that will override everything. So that's the final highest priority. So the lowest priority is the ink and paper colour in the location. That can be overridden either ink and or paper on the tile, and then on top of that, if there's any painted attributes in the room, that will prioritize higher again. And the way it applies in terms of brushes is very similar. So a brush, if we look at some brushes here, so we've got this brush here, which is this one. So that's got attributes baked into it, so that will behave as if it were painting tiles. So again, the brush will paint the tile information onto the screen using the baked in color information to override what's specified at the location, but you can override that again by painting colors on top, which is exactly what happens here. So this one is the same brush, but I've painted red on green instead of the default green on red over the top using the roller, and that's indicated by the white outline. The white outline is a utility in Kwyll that shows that you've got some attributes painted here but no tiles, because Kwyll doesn't recognize those as tiles. It's a brush, it's not tiles in the tile map. Okay, so, and then you got this one here. So if I go through each in turn, that's probably the easiest way of explaining what each of these things does. So I've explained this one. This is a brush. If I go to the brush mode, you can see, if I hover over it, you can see it's a brush. It's a brush with baked in attributes. So this will use those colours, green ink on red paper, that are baked into the brush, no matter what the colours on the room are. And there's nothing painting over the top, so those are the colours you'll see. So if we go to the map, you'll see this one here is green ink on red paper there, and green ink on red paper there. Okay, the next one is the same brush painted, but then I've painted, or pasted, I prefer to use the word paste to paste a brush. And then I've painted attributes over the top to change the colour from green on red to red on green. And again, as attributes painted in the attribute map are the highest priority, they will take priority no matter what. So they will always be red on green and red on green, irrespective of what the room says. So going down, we've got these ones here. These are just plain tiles. There's no attributes painted in the attribute map here. These are just the tiles that are pasted on, and they contain an ink color only. So they will adopt the ink color, or they will force the ink color of the tile, but leave the paper color untouched. So when we look at that in the map, they will always have magenta ink, but they'll be using the paper color of the room, the next priority down. So that one will be magenta on green, this one should be magenta on red. And then we've got the next one here, which is the same tile, so it's painted, but this one's yellow because if I turn off the attributes, you'll see I've painted yellow on black over the top using the roller. So again, as the roller is the attribute map painted with the roller is the highest priority, that will always override everything. So in the map, that should always be yellow on black no matter what, even though the tile itself has a magenta ink, because the yellow and black attribute painted over the top of it overrides that. Then going down, I've got to try and remember what each one of these are, so give me a moment sometimes. So this tile that's been used here has no information in at all, colour, so it has no preference. It will, if I turn the attributes off, you'll see that's what it looks like normally painted without any attributes. So clearly I've painted some green on red attributes over here, and again green on red painted using the roller in the attribute map is the highest priority, so that means they will be green on red always. You can see that works there. This one's the interesting one. So this has no attributes painted over it, so it's just that plain tile put into place on there with no attributes on the tile, no color attributes on the tile, no attributes painted over the top. So these tiles should adopt the ink and paper color of the room. So we've got the room sets the ink and paper color, nothing on the tile overrides it, and nothing on the attribute map overrides it, so it should just use the ink and paper color. So if we go to here, we can see black on green, and this one is blue on red, so it takes blue on red. And this one here I've already covered a little, so this is one where the tile has both ink and paper specified, so this will override the ink and paper color of the location, but there's no attribute map painted on over here, so it will just use that, it will stop there. So this should stay cyan on blue in both locations. The rest of it down here is just to show that it all works with brushes as well. So these are both brushes. If I hover, you can't see that one on green, but these are both brushes. This brush here, which you can see has no attributes baked into it. So this is just a plain brush, which is the equivalent to these tiles up here. So it should adopt the ink and paper color of the location. So black on green, blue on red. And this one is the same brush painted with the same brush definition that has no attributes. If I turn the attributes off, you can see, and then I've painted with the roller over the top cyan on blue, so the roller and the attribute map is the highest priority, so that should force those colors in both locations. Cyan on blue, cyan on blue. And then just at the bottom row we've got these two are also brushes, just demonstrations that the same technique or the same rules work when it's a brush. This is a brush that contains no attributes, but it contains tiles that contains a forced ink color, so this will force the ink color in those cells to be the ink color of the tile, but leave the paper color as before, so it should adopt the paper color of the room, which you can see there, magenta on green and magenta on red. And then finally the same thing, it's a brush with no attributes baked into it. So if we look at the brush, it has no attributes, but it's using a tile that does. So those tile colours will override the location colours, and then there's nothing painted on top of here to modify that, so that's what it will be in both cases. The last thing I had here, which is just a quick, this is a demonstration of what happens if you paint into cells that have no tile. So we're painting attributes only here, there's no tile in there. If I turn the attributes off, you can see there's no tile at all, hence the white outline. So this will be cyan paper, and I'm not sure what the ink is, it's irrelevant because there's nothing in there. And this just shows that if you paint cells with attributes but no tiles, they will adopt that paper colour in priority over the paper colour of the location. So I think that covers most of them. There's probably some edge cases where I haven't covered it here. I'll extend this test case just to prove, or just to capture all of the possible combinations as I remember some or think of some, but that covers most of what it does. And if I show you in the preview, you can see it works in the preview as well. All of those colours should match what we were just going through, adopting the in particular the ones that adopt the colours of the location, blue on red, and these ones here that adopt the paper only but leave the ink as defined in the tile. And just to prove that it works, if I export that quickly and switch over to the emulator and run it, it all does exactly the same thing. So we can see we've got black on green here, we've got magenta on green there, and if I switch, blue on red, magenta on red. So it's working on the spectrum side as well. So what does this mean in terms of, you can see it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how to paint. What it means in terms of optimal use is you have a lot of tools available to you. If you want the vast majority of your level to be two particular colours, choose them at the location level and then just leave the tiles uncoloured, and that gives you the flexibility. If you have a particular tile that's always a certain ink colour no matter what, set it on the tile, because it means you're setting it in one place just on the tile definition, and you're not having to paint over lots of use of that tile in each room, which is what you'd have to do before if you wanted to change a colour of a tile, or set the colour of a tile even, because there was no changing it. If you wanted to set the colour of a tile, like a brick tile, to always be red, you would have to paint each use of that tile, which is obviously quite expensive. So now you can set it in one place, and every time you use that tile, it will default to red. And you've got those flexible tools to choose based on what your game design is and how you're building your levels. What's the most efficient way of defining the colours that you want in your room. So just quickly, one more thing I wanted to cover while I'm talking about this. If I switch to the editor again, I've enhanced. Most people won't have ever used this. This is mainly for me. It's a code view, so it's what gets exported when you do an export, but without exporting. I used it in the past to quickly understand what was going wrong, or if there was anything going wrong or changing in the code output. So this was the window that was always there. This is the C code that gets generated when you do an export with all the data and everything. But I've added a couple of extra things in here now for those who haven't seen them. So this is a breakdown of various size information. It doesn't cover everything yet, but it covers a lot. So if you look at the sprites, for example, everywhere there's a bookmark, you can click on it and it will jump to the right place. You can see we've got one sprite sheet, and that's the data for the sprite sheet, and this quickly summarises it uses 208 bytes. The tiles, again, we can jump to the tiles and see that they use 24. Unfortunately, I haven't added in this new data for the tile attributes yet, so I'll add that later. So we've added an extra 3 bytes there and an extra 6 bytes for colour, but I'll add that later. And we can do things like look at object animations, brushes, so the brushes use a certain amount of data as well, and you can see exactly how much data you're using. the room map. So this is the tiles information for the single room. This is the attributes information for the single room, and then we've got the collisions and nothing, but there's brushes where I've painted various brushes. So it's good to come in here and look at what you're generating here in terms of data, and have a think. If you end up having lots and lots of tiles, or you're using a huge amount of space on tiles, it might be worth looking at your room and seeing if there's any way that you can save space by defining some brushes and reusing them. If there's lots of areas in your room that have similar sequences of tiles, can they be converted into a brush and pasted a number of times to reduce the overall usage? So this is a useful tool to work out the most efficient way of designing your rooms when you're using this new system. I hope that's fairly clear. If you've got any questions, do pop a comment down in the comments below, or pop over to the Discord, even better, and I'm quite happy to explain it and answer any questions over there. And hopefully there'll be a proper development update coming, maybe not this weekend because I'm at Crash Live, but maybe early next week. And there's been quite a few changes happened since the last update, so keep an eye out for that one. And don't forget to subscribe and like if you like, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.